Hello folks, I want to talk about wireless access points because it's a big part of PC maintenance. People will call you and say, hey, my PC's not connected to the internet or my PC's slow, and you get there and it's their internet that's the problem. Like they're trying to go to websites and that stuff is all slow. And it's actually a wireless problem. Plus, nowadays when you are a PC person, people tend to think that you know everything, like that you know how to do web stuff, you know how to do programming, you know how to do wireless, you know how to do routing and switching. It's amazing. But anyway, so I digress. So these Linksys devices were pretty popular for many years, and Best Buy sold them by the hundreds. I mean, they were just going out like, anyway, you get the idea. So your wireless access point for home use is really 3 devices in one. There are 4 switch ports on there, and you can see the little 4 ports, and that's the switch. And then there's a routed port that's typically in yellow that connects to the internet, and that's the routed port or the router. And then inside the device is the firewall that blocks things that you don't want to block, or that you want to port forward, things like that. So it's cheap only because it's made out of plastic, and the components in there are not very good. They're very low quality. But they get the job done. Most of the time, your wireless access points will last you a couple years. I've had people that have had the same one for 10 years. I've had people that bought one and it died like in a couple weeks. It all depends on luck of the draw. All right, so when you are buying a wireless access point, you have to decide what kind of speed you're going to use. It's got to be able to link with all the devices you have at home. And there are different protocols. There's 802.11, A, B, G, N, AC, AX, that kind of stuff. So if I go and I buy one, it'll be listed here. So this is 802.11 AC. So I need to make sure that that's compatible with what I have at home, with my wireless card or whatever my wireless is on my laptop or my Roku or whatever, whatever I'm using at home. But regardless of which one you buy, they all have a reset button. And here you can see, like, it's in red. I don't know if you can really kind of see it's right there where I'm putting my mouse. This one is a little better view, but they all have this reset button. So you can apply power and then hold that reset button in, and that will wipe the device. It'll wipe out any configurations off and put it back to the factory settings like when they purchased it in the box. And that way you can buy one at a garage sale for $1, take it home, power it up, plug that or press that button in for 10 seconds, and that'll wipe any configuration they had, and then you're free to do whatever configurations you want to do. All right, now that said, well, how do you connect to it? Well, you just plug your PC into a switch port, one of the 4 ports that's on the left. And then if I open up into my network and I hit Ethernet and adapter settings, if I right click on my adapter that's connected and I do status and then details, it tells me my IP address is 192.168.1.100 and my default gateway is 192.168.1.1. Now the default gateway is the router, and that's what I'm plugged into. So I can access the web interface by typing in 192.168.1.1. So if I go in here and 192, and I already have one sitting there, bloop. And then it'll ask me the password. Now you can Google default passwords for these devices, and the big list comes up, and you can see the Linksys is admin, and Cisco's not listed there, which is kind of weird. But there are other lists that have way more devices in there. So I'm just going to type in admin, and boom, I'm in. Now obviously I don't want to save that. All right, so this first page, there's not a whole lot you can do. This is more just your DHCP page. So do I want to turn on DHCP? Do I want to give it a static IP address? Things like that. So here's my internal address. So it's 192.168.1.1, and I can change this to 1.10 if I wanted to. And set subnet and turn DHCP on or off. And then I've got to pick a starting address. Usually it starts you at 50, and then by default I think that these are set for like 100. Why you'd want to hand out 100 IP addresses, I have no idea, but it just does. So there's not a whole lot of stuff to play with in there, unless you're really, really scared somebody's going to access your device from in your house. Because that's the only time they can actually hit that IP address, 192.168.1.1, because that's the wired address. All right. So again, you can enable or disable DHCP. You can, if you've only got 2 devices at home that use wireless, you can just set the max users to 5. You always want to give yourself at least 1 extra in case one address, the lease isn't expired yet. All right, the other options down here, there's not a whole lot here. I have no idea what DDNS does. MAC address clone, like if you want to change your MAC address, or the advanced routing. There's not a whole lot of stuff that actually is functional, that does anything, that's going to show up. All right, but if I hit wireless, now I've got a place here where I can decide which protocols my device supports. And usually, like, they'll support a lot of the backwards compatibility ones. And that way, if you've got an older G protocol Roku device, you can still connect to it. So this one is old. It only has the B and G. When wireless first came out, the two big standards were like A and B. So when you see A and B supported, you know that's an old device. And then everything kind of went to G. A had speed, but B had range, and then G kind of combined both of those. And that's really, once G came out, that's when wireless really kind of blew up. All right, so once you pick your radio, then you have to give your wireless a name. And I just named mine FBI Van 5. Different people use different names. And then you can decide whether you want to broadcast that name so it shows up in the wireless list, or if you want to disable that. And now, if you're in an apartment complex, I guarantee you somebody has tried to access your wireless. That's just the way people are. Even me, like when I first moved out to Hartville, I was in this house. I called, Time Warner Cable, AT&T. The earliest they could get out there was like 3 weeks. So I'm like, I can't live with 3 weeks without wireless. So I just built like a cantenna, pointed around, and found somebody that had wireless, and they were using WEP protocol, which is crazy weak. I cracked it, and I used their wireless for a couple weeks. And then I sent them a letter and said, hey, by the way, I work in IT, and I've noticed that you're using this protocol. It's really weak. Somebody's going to track your wireless, and then hopefully they changed it. But I digress. All right, so again, you can enable or disable. If I disable that, my wireless won't show up in any list. So you'll have to type it in manually. But again, that's a very safe way, especially like, again, if you live in an apartment complex, or if you live somewhere where the houses are really close together, or again, people can create what they call a cantenna, and just out of a can of peaches and a little bit of hardware, you can make a antenna that's directional, and you can kind of point it around, and you can go out for miles. So one of the best, most secure things you can do is disable your SID broadcast, and just make sure that you remember what your SID is, because obviously if you forget your SID, then you won't be able to connect to wireless. And then last, you want to pick your channel. So whether you're on the 2.4 frequency or the 5 gigahertz frequency, they both have channels. And some of the channels overlap with each other. And when I have overlapping channels, if you only have one wireless device, it really doesn't matter what channel you pick. If you're going to have more than one wireless access point in your house or your business, then you're really concerned about your channels, because if I'm on channel 1 in a hallway and then down the hallway there's a channel 3, my device was going to see both of those as kind of the same thing. And it's going to kind of timeshare between both of those. So now I'm not time sharing with one device, I'm time sharing with 2 devices, which actually is much slower. So the non-overlapping channels are 1, 6, and 11. And if you run any kind of software, like this is Insider, which is a free program, and you can see they're using the SSID as a pun thinking for their name. But it shows you all the connections for channel 1, 6, and 11, or anything else that would be in there. But 9 times out of 10, everybody picks 1, 6, or 11. And by default, most wireless access points come from the store on channel 1. So that's one of the first things you want to change. And it shows you the different strengths of the different wireless networks. Remember, the lower number is the better. What channel they're on, what kind of security they're running, and then what protocols they're sending out. All right, so that is a good page to access, and make sure that you adjusted that on your wireless. Now, when I go to wireless security, I've got a couple options. I have WPA, WPA2, and I have WEP. Unless you have a server at home, you're not going to be using Enterprise or Radius. WEP is the weakest protocol out there. It's like toilet paper as far as protocol goes. And the problem with WEP is it sends the router password in with every data packet. So as long as somebody can scan your wireless, which obviously is all out there in the in the air for free, they can actually, if they get enough packets, they can actually crack your wireless. A 9-year-old or older can typically watch a 10-minute YouTube video, and they can crack your WEP key on their own, which is amazing. And they don't even need a password list; it just cracks it. So WPA or WPA2 are going to be stronger ones that you want to use, and you just don't want to use the enterprise because again, that you got to have the server, whatever. You're authenticating to another device. So if I hit WPA, I can then pick: do I want TKIP or AES? AES is the stronger one, and then I got to put in a pre-shared key. Now, here's where that strong password comes into play. You want to have a password that's very strong. It's a phrase, you know, JMax smells like poo, or the shine from JMax forehead, you know, blinds my eyes, whatever it is. But a phrase, because they'll never guess a phrase, but they will guess passwords. They'll guess your pet names, your address, birth dates, whatever they can find in your mail. And even WPA2 and WPA and WPA3, the newest one, they can all three be cracked. They only send the password when somebody connects. But there are ways in wireless that you can send a code that disconnects everybody from the access point. So then when they reconnect, you can grab their handshake. And then that has their password in there. And then you start cracking it with your dictionary attack. But again, if my dictionary doesn't have your password in there, I'll never crack your stuff. So that's why you want to have a very strong password. All right, there's also a MAC address filter. And this allows you to create a list of what MAC addresses are allowed and which ones are not allowed on your network. So if you ever see for some reason, like a MAC address pops up in your list and you're like, hey, who the heck is that? Obviously somebody has got access to your wireless device and they're stealing your internet. So you want to make sure you block them. So typically what we do is we go through our house and we grab our Rokus and we grab our cell phones, our laptops, our tablets, and we write down all the MAC addresses and we create a permit only list. And that way, even if they were to access my device and use my password or whatever, this would block them and keep them off of your wireless. And then there are these advanced wireless settings. I got to disable that. And if I go to the advanced, there's nothing here that you really want to change that's going to make any noticeable effect on your stuff. So you should typically leave that one alone. All right, then if I go to security, there's not a whole lot there. I don't know. I don't really play a lot with the VPN on my home device. Yeah, again, nothing a whole lot there. You can block certain services if you want to. But the big one is this applications and gaming and quality of service. Quality of service is the bomb. You want to turn this on. And then I can decide my PC, I can put my MAC address in here and I can say, hey, my PC is going to have the highest priority. Everybody else is going to be the lowest. So then whenever my PC connects, I get more bandwidth than everybody else in my house. Or I can do that by the port I plug into, what port number I plug into. Or I can do it by the application name. So if I only want priority when I play World of Warcraft, I can then give that the highest priority and then put in the port number for the World of Warcraft server. So again, that's just a way that you can give yourself more priority over your kids, which is kind of nice. And then there's also port forwarding. Now, different devices call this something different. I had one wireless access point from Spectrum years ago, and it was called Virtual Server is where this port forwarding was. And this doesn't call it port forwarding, it just calls it port range forward. So if for some reason, like I have a Minecraft server at my house that my kids want to play on, and they want to share that with their friends because they want their friends to play. So I can just type in Minecraft, and then you have to find the port numbers for that server for Minecraft. So I don't remember what it is. I'm just going to put in some random port numbers. And you have to pick the protocol. Is it going to be TCP, UDP, or both? And then I want to redirect that internally to address 192.168.1.9. So then anytime somebody accesses your wireless access point from outside, and the packet's destined for these port numbers, it will be redirected internally to your router or your server at this IP address. And then you just enable, and then you're all set. So again, that way you can share games and stuff at home without opening up your whole, all your ports, which obviously you don't want to do. You can just open up just the ports for that game. But then again, they're going to be able to access that game or that server through that hole, which usually is not a big problem. All right, then I have no idea what they call port triggering. DMZ is something you're not going to do at home. DMZ, we kind of use two firewalls and we create like a web space in between them. Now for administration, here's where we change that default password, which is one of the first things you should do. You never want to have default passwords on your device. So here's where I can change it from admin to something else. And again, you want to use a phrase. Then you can decide whether I want wireless devices to be able to access this screen. And we typically want to disable that. And then when this is accessed, do I want to access it through HTTP or HTTPS, which is more secure? Do I want to allow remote management, on the web? And then what IP address do I want to use? Or I'm sorry, what port number do I want to use? So if I enable this, current password. Okay. So if I enable this, I could be somewhere else, and I could type in my public IP address name, and then do so my IP address, and then colon 8080, and then I would be able to connect to this device in this web browser. So I don't know if you ever want to do that, but again, you can do that. There's not a whole this other stuff. There's not a whole lot you can do. If I want to log everything, do I want to run diagnostics? Do I want to update my firmware? Do I want to set it back to factory defaults? Do I want to create a backup of my config in case something happens I have to restore it later? So again, not a whole lot. And then status. Status is nice because I can go to local network and I can see who's connected to my device. And you'll have to do this like at different times of day to see if anybody else is connecting to your device. So the host name will show up. It's either the computer name or the device name will show up. So if you see something there that you're like, hey, why is this guy connecting to my network? You can then block that IP, that MAC address in the block list. All right, and that's about it. So whenever you buy a new device for your house for the wireless access point, you don't have to install that software device, or the CD that comes with it. Because that CD will have a bunch of bloatware. Like it'll give you like a 30-day trial of Microsoft Office. It'll give you a 30-day trial of McAfee antivirus. It gives you all these stupid trial software things. And sometimes those CDs actually get infected with a virus at the factory. And then you're installing that virus on your PC. So basically, it just gives you a bunch of bloatware. All you need to do is plug your PC into that device, find your default gateway, access the web interface, and then set it up yourself. And then you don't have any of that stupid software, and it's configured the way you want it to. A lot of those, like, they only give you like a stripped down version of setup. Like, hey, what's the starting IP address? What do you want to reset the name to? Okay, you're all done. Boom. But you want to get in there and you want to play with that quality of service and give yourself priority over your kids. And that way when they're watching Roku or downloading their stupid videos on YouTube, they're not messing with your game performance or whatever. All right, so if you guys have any questions about wireless, make sure you let me know. Other than that, have a great week and have a great vacation.